We are back with Ontario Premier Kathleen Wynne here in her Queen's Park office. And we're going to continue our conversation about talking about some of the ups and downs in the 3 going on 4 years since Madam Wynne took over this office in early 2013. And Helen, why don't you start this time?
I will this time. Okay, so yes, there have been ups and downs, and some of those have had to do with relationships that you've had with other party leaders at various levels of government, and even, you know, at this level at Queen's Park. I want to ask you about Andrea Horwath a little bit, because you had her support and then you didn't for your second budget, and that's what brought about the election of 2014. Right. So those relationships obviously deteriorated. You can comment on that, and then I want to ask you about Stephen Harper.
When I first came into this office in 2013, we prepared a budget, and one of the things that I did was ask Tim Hudak and Andrea Horwath to come in and talk to me about what their thoughts on the budget were. Tim really wasn't interested in having that conversation in any real way, but Andrea did. She did take part in it, and you know, there were things like the financial accountability officer, for example, that she put forward as an idea. I thought it was a good idea, and we adopted it and put it in the budget.
Collegial.
Yeah, it
so
actually
what happened?
worked. Well, I think that. A, it's a very partisan place. B, the timing was different. I think she had, they had done their thing for a year in minority government, or it was the second year, and I think that she was ready for an election. And we were at a point where we knew there were things that we wanted to do, and we weren't going to be able to do them if we stayed in a minority position. And so I did try. I did ask both Andrea and Tim again if they wanted to take part. There was less willingness the second time around, and so I made it clear that we were going to bring forward our budget. We brought it forward, as you know, and as soon as it came forward, she indicated that she wasn't going to support it. And we already knew that the Conservatives weren't going to, and we were then into the campaign.
Yeah, and then the relationship with Stephen Harper was also quite fraught. But was that just because of the retirement pension plan, or you really seemed to take him on? And for a conciliator like you, somebody who's a mediator, in fact, it seems like he was a bit of a target for you, or was it in reverse?
Well, I think there was a bit of both. I think that. He didn't like the decisions I was making as the premier of the biggest province in the country,
and he didn't want to meet with you.
And he didn't want to meet with me, and he didn't want to have a collegial relationship, but he didn't want to have a collegial relationship with the premiers in general. You know, he didn't want to meet with the premiers. There were a few that he met with, but for the most part, he didn't see the benefit to him or his government in having a working relationship with the premiers. And, for me, that's just antithetical to how the country should work. Even if you don't agree, I think that sitting down with the leaders of the provinces and territories is an extremely important part of the job of Prime Minister. So we fundamentally disagreed on so many things, including retirement security.
Right.
When all of the finance ministers across the country and all of the premiers across the country said, yeah, there is a problem. We don't know how to fix it without the federal government. I wasn't prepared to take that for an answer. And so I think when we then stepped into the notion of putting an Ontario retirement pension plan on the table, that was just salt in the wound. He really was very, very opposed to that, and the relationship just went from bad to worse.
Right. One former political provincial or progressive conservative that you do have a very good relationship with now, somewhat ironically, since you beat him in the riding in 2007 in the riding of Don Valley West. I'm talking about, obviously, Toronto Mayor John Tory.
Yes.
And your relationship with him is apparently quite cordial now, particularly after the rather chaotic Rob Ford years. But let's talk specifically about the issue of tolls, because as we all know, Mayor Tory has proposed tolls on the Don Valley Parkway and the Gardiner Expressway. You've indicated that you're not going to stand in the way, but how fundamentally in favor are you of tolls, or do you just agree that this is really the only option that Mayor Tory has?
So let me just start by saying that even when John came into Don Valley West to run against me, it was a very civil debate.
Yeah.
You know, it was a civil relationship.
It's hard not to get along with John Tory.
Exactly. You know, we got along very well. We always have. And so now we've become friends in terms of our political roles. So in terms of tolls, I mean, remember, we had high occupancy toll lanes in our budget 2 budgets ago. And, you know, we ran on having new revenue tools in order to be able to fund the infrastructure that we know needs to be built, including transit. So that's one piece of it. So I'm philosophically supportive of those kinds of pricing mechanisms, revenue tools. But the other piece of it is, I believe in local democracy. You know, we started this conversation talking about a provincial government that was imposing its will in terms of amalgamation on city governments unilaterally. And I don't believe that that is the relationship that is most constructive for a province and municipalities. So I believe that if council has a debate and there's a consultation and there's an agreement that comes forward, a proposal that comes forward from, you know, a mature level of government like a municipality of Toronto, then we need to work with them.
Who are you to step in the way?
Yeah. Now, there will be lots of questions. You know, there will be lots of questions.
Yep.
Once the proposal is put forward, there'll be lots of questions about timing and the technology, and all of those will have to be answered, and we will have to work on that. And I also believe that people need to have choices, you know, so we're going to have to talk about that. But fundamentally, I believe that the City of Toronto has the right to have this discussion and make a decision and make a proposal to the province.
Right.
I want to move the subject over to the Auditor General's report, which came out a couple of weeks ago. You know, it's every year the Auditor General kind of outlays a litany of issues and government waste, misspending. And specifically this time it was critical of your government for inappropriate spending on highway construction costs and on metro links for some shoddy work that was paid for. Do you share those concerns, or are you blindsided by the Auditor General's report and wonder, how do these things get away from us?
Well, the point of the officers of the legislature is that they work to make sure that government is doing the best that it can do. You know, that good decisions are being made, that the money that is invested on behalf of the people of Ontario is invested in the best way possible, and services are provided, and whatever is built in the best way possible. That's their job, and that's her job as the Auditor General. So I always, when I stand in the legislature and I thank the Auditor General, I really do mean it, because I think without that level of oversight, it would be not, the system would not work as well. Sure. So I appreciate her insights, and you know, I obviously would like to see a completely clean, incident-free report, you know, but that's never happened. There are always issues that Auditors General find and shine a light on. The issue is how quickly we respond, whether we are already on the case, you know, whether we've discovered it ourselves, and many of the issues that she raises, the ministry officials and the minister's office already were aware of and are already working on. And so that to me is the measure of good government, is, are you preempting these things? Are you fixing them when you hear about them? And will you work with the Auditor General going forward to make sure they don't happen again? And it's yes to all of those things.
Yeah.
I'm going to change the subject now, and I'm going to ask you about the economy, because you recently gave a speech at the Canadian Club and talked about the strength of the Ontario economy. It's stronger than probably any province's economy in Canada right now.
We're one of the leaders, yeah.
One of the leaders.
Yeah, one or two.
And lots of job creation and business investment, but that prosperity is not being shared evenly.
Yes.
And I wonder, is it even possible to, I mean, it's laudable, but is it possible to say that no worker, no region, and no family will be left behind? How do you approach that?
Well, that has to be the objective. You know, it has to be the goal for a government in Ontario to not leave anyone in this province behind. And is it attainable in a one term? Probably not. But I believe that government exists to put in place the supports, to put in place the conditions where that could possibly be true. So things like the free tuition for kids who are living in low and low middle income families.
Education is key, of course.
Exactly. Education, as I always say, it's at the heart of everything that we do as government, because if more people can get a good education, then everything else falls into place.
They can get a good job, and they
exactly
can
better health, all of it falls into place. So making sure that kids have access to great education, healthcare. You know, our demographics are changing, and so when we say no one left behind, that's no young families, and it's also seniors. You know, there are many people who are my age and older, the baby boomers, who have parents who still need support, and we need to make sure that they get that support, and that in the process we have a healthcare system that evolves and is sustainable. So I believe that leaving no one behind has to be the goal, and that I will do everything in my power to achieve it.
Premier, you've never shied away from taking responsibility for things. I mean, just your answer on the Auditor General is an indication of the fact that you don't try to gloss over things, but you've also almost made a habit of apologizing. You've apologized for the gas plant fiasco that you largely inherited from your predecessor. You've apologized to Ontario's Indigenous communities for decades of mistreatment. You've apologized for high electricity rates recently, and for the fact that, perhaps your government hasn't paid close enough attention to how rates have gone up. What do you say to critics who say that, what good is an apology, or even cynics who say, well, you're just trying to score political points, but that's really not very good?
Well, let me just, each one of those is different, you know. So on the gas plants, there were processes there that should have been better. Yeah. No, and I was part of a government that should have done better on that, and I apologized because of that. On our relationship with Indigenous people, I would say that's different in kind. Mm-hmm. You know, I believe that as a non-Indigenous Canadian, a non-Indigenous Ontarian, it is my responsibility to take responsibility for our history, and not only that, to take responsibility for the wrongful telling of our history. You know, we haven't told our history in an honest way, and so I think one of the most important things that we can do in terms of truth and reconciliation is to change the curriculum, to make sure that everyone who goes through the school system in Ontario learns about residential school, learns about treaties, learns about that relationship. So I see that as different in kind, yes. But in some ways, it's the deepest apology that I have made. On electricity prices, I know that people are hurting in the province. We made decisions that have cost people money, and the decisions that we've made have been to shut down the coal-fired plants, to jumpstart a renewable electricity industry in this province, to invest in kilometers, thousands of kilometers of line, because the system was degraded. So in that case, it's not so much that there was a mistake, because I don't see those things as a mistake. I see those things as necessary repair of a system that was broken, which now is reliable. It's clean, we don't have smog days, we don't have brownouts and blackouts, but there's a cost associated with that. So when I'm saying I'm sorry there, what I'm saying is I'm really sorry that those decisions that we made have meant that people have had to pay more. So taking 8% off people's bills as of January 1st, that will help. Taking another 12% off rural and northern bills, that will help too. making sure that we have the Ontario Energy Support Program that can take up to 30% off people's bills, people who are living in low income and modest circumstances. But even with all of that, I know it's not enough, and there's more that we have to do. So we're looking right now, the Minister of Energy, it is his #1 priority to find ways to help people with those costs that were born because we had to invest in a degraded system.
Premier, it feels like, despite all the things that you've done and continue to do, it feels like 2016 might have been a tough year for you in some ways. And I think perhaps the loss of one of your key staff people and close friends, Pat Sobara, because of alleged violations of the Election Act, might have been part of that. But do you look at 2016 and think, I'm really glad this year is coming to an end, and I'm looking forward to the next year? Or do you really look back and see more achievement than losses?
Well, government and politics, you talked about ups and downs. Yeah. Every day has ups and downs, you know, and I mean, politics is life, you know. Life has unpredictable events, dear sir, events that happen, and that we have to absorb, that we have to react to, and we have to have a plan all the while that we're working on. So 2016 was a year. You know, what happened south of the border is part of that. I'm looking forward to 2017 for many reasons.
That's a perfect way to end.
Thank you
so much, Premier.
Thanks for sharing
Pleasure
that
to be with you.
Yeah.
And we'll be back with more Toronto Files after this break.